Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors.
Chapter 18. Gail. I could not fucking believe this guy, marching into the shop with a book in his hands and a pissed-off expression on his face. Not only did Michael Andrews have the gall to show up in my store, but he had the gall to act like he was the injured party. As long as I live, I will never get over the absolute nerve of men. Even the ones you think are gentle will act like the Terminator when you call them out on their bullshit. It was foolish of me to be so surprised that he had the arrogance to show up here today, and annoying as hell that my traitorous heart could still pound like that when I was so furious at him. "Get out now," I said, "or I will call the cops. I'm not fucking around with you, Michael."
"Go ahead and call the cops,"
he said, and his voice was as close to a sneer as he was capable of.
"They can't arrest me for returning your property in a public place."
He took out the copy of the History of the Necronomicon that I'd loaned him and tossed it on the counter. "Fine, Andrews. There are plenty of women in this city who will fall for your tortured writer act. Go make them listen to your shitty music."
"My music may be shitty, but at least it's real, Gail. I'm not fake."
I saw a customer pull her phone out of her purse and start recording this interaction. If I had any sense, I would shut up right now and save my business's reputation. "I'm not the liar in this room. You're the liar, Michael. A liar and a cheater. And you're not even very good at it."
"I've never lied about my feelings, Gail."
"What are you talking about?" I picked up the book and flung it at his head. "Get the fuck out of here!" Michael ducked, and the book hit the wall behind him, where it splayed open and a wad of cash fluttered all over the shop floor. "What is this?"
"Payment for services. Anne told me you refused her money, but I don't want you to feel like you worked for free."
At that moment, it felt like the wind had been knocked out of my lungs, and I found it hard to reply. "Are you calling me some kind of whore?" He ran his hands through his hair and closed his eyes for a second.
"No, Gail. I don't talk like that. You would know that if you paid attention to me or anyone besides yourself for even 2 seconds.
I heard the customer gasp, but didn't look over at her. Michael continued.
"But now that you mentioned it, I don't know what else you call someone who gets paid for the pleasure of their company."
"I got paid to help you research your stupid book."
"Yes, and then you continue getting paid to spend time with me."
I groaned. "Oh, God, that is not what happened, and you know it. But go ahead and believe whatever you want about me. I will sleep just fine tonight knowing that I am not a cheater."
"Neither am I!"
he roared, and it was so loud we were all stunned into silence for a few seconds. "I saw you, Andrews," I finally said. "Jesus Christ, the two of you were practically tearing each other to shreds on the streets of New York when you were supposed to be visiting your hoser relatives." Okay, yes, I admit that saying hoser was a dumb insult. I don't know any other Canadian insults. Michael may have had a point when he said, "I don't always pay attention." At that moment, the door opened, and his girlfriend stepped into the store. "Get away from him," she spat at me. "Unbelievable." "Bitch, you better walk your ass right out of my store," I snapped at her. But before I could make a move, Michael had come between us, blocking me from her upraised arms. She looked from me to Michael a few times, and then her face creased into a vague smile. "Mikey, honey, dinner's almost ready. I made lasagna, your favorite." Her voice was thin and wheedling, but he seemed unmoved, probably because he knew she'd exposed another one of his lies. He had told me his favorite meal was a rare steak and herbed French fries. Her arms went up to hug him, and that was when I saw the hospital bracelet on her right wrist. I frowned and examined her closer. There was a gauze bandage on her inner arm, where an IV might have been. I looked up at Michael, who had his hands up to block her embrace. "What's the matter, honey?" she asked, and an edge had crept into her voice. "It's her, isn't it? Is she trying to ruin your work again?"
"That's Enough, Beatrice,
he said, and my blood ran cold. I had never heard him sound so menacing before.
You will not go near her ever.
What the hell was going on with this couple of crazies? I looked over at the customer, still filming us, and glanced purposefully down at her phone, hoping she'd get my message and call the cops. She nodded once, and I saw her finger go to the screen. I was just about to tell them both to leave when I saw Beatrice's face change. She went from simpering to savage in less than a second. Her hands came up, and she started pounding his beautiful face. What the fuck, lady? I was on her before I even registered what I was doing. I shoved her up against the store's front window. She clawed at my face, screaming the whole time. I ducked my head, and she grabbed a handful of my hair and pulled. I got my knee into her gut to pin her against the window, anchored her shoulders with my left arm, and used my right to smack her face. How dare you come at me in my own store, you little psycho? How dare you sleep with my husband, you slut? She screeched, and then she spit at me. He doesn't love you. He loves me. He loves me. Her face contorted into a grotesque mask, and she flailed against my arms. Michael reached around me and held her hands down, and a crowd started to form on the sidewalk outside.
Beatrice,
He said, and his normally calm voice shook.
We're gonna get you some help.
I don't want help, Mikey, my love. I just want you to come home for dinner. Our kids are there, all of our kids. We have so many children, and they love you so much, and I love you so much. My love, just come home to me, please? Her words swam in my head, but I couldn't make sense of anything because adrenaline was coursing through my body at warp speed. I glanced back at the customer, speaking in a low voice into her phone, and she gave me a thumbs up and pointed out the window. I heard sirens approaching and finally took a good look at Michael. I could never imagined this expression on his face. A wounded, terrible fear. Like a cornered animal. He took the mug I offered, but I didn't sit next to him on the purple velvet couch. Instead, I pulled up the stool that normally rested behind the counter and sat across from him. The city had grown dark in the last hour we'd spent talking to the police, but I was too tired to turn on the shop lights, so we sat in darkness and sipped the mint tea I had made us.
I've never wanted to hit a woman before. Ever. But when she came at you, God, Gail, who am I? I don't hit anyone, especially women.
There's a big difference between wanting to hit and actually hitting. I know you wouldn't have done it. But she was out of her mind. You had every right to protect yourself.
It wasn't me I was worried about.
I nodded and touched my bottom lip. One of her punches had landed hard, and I could still taste the blood where my tooth had cut through the flesh. He took a deep breath.
I would never cheat, Gail. If that's the only thing you remember about me, I want it to be that.
I nodded. I know that. I had to stop and think for a second. I had been about to say, I let my crazy side get the best of me, but that felt unnecessarily cruel after what we'd just witnessed. My worst side, I finally said. I let my worst side get the best of me, my insecure side. I panicked when I saw you with her. I was wrong. His face was shadowed, and I couldn't read his expression, but I saw him nod.
So was I.
I always assumed you knew about the money, Michael. I thought it was some kind of industry practice when writers do research. I waited through an agonizing pause before he answered.
But you kept taking it, even after the research was over.
Yes, I said. I needed it. I waved my hand toward the back wall of the shop, freshly painted but still smelling faintly sweet. You know I needed it back then. And I still need it now. We both glanced over the front windows where I had slammed Beatrice, a deep crack running the length of it, temporarily taped over until I could call a repair person in.
So, none of it was real?
You're not serious, are you? All of it was real. Michael, that first day I went to meet you, I was going to take the cash and run.
But you didn't. You kept playing me.
God, I wanted to weep at the heartbroken sound of his voice. He really did believe it. I wanted you. Mainly because of... I waved my hand in his general direction. You know, your face. The ghost of a half smile crossed his mouth, and it reminded me of the first day in the cafe when that slow smirk nearly melted me into a puddle. I thought maybe we could just bang it out and I could get you out of my system. But then I realized I genuinely liked you. They asked me to keep you writing, and I was more than happy for a reason to spend time with you. I couldn't get enough of you.
I find it hard to believe anything about what we had.
Well, join the club. I set my mug down with a loud thunk and stood up to flip on the house lights. I was startled by the sight of him. Her blows had left angry bruises on his cheeks. His eyes ran over me, and I knew he was examining the scratch marks across my own face. The EMTs had patched me up with butterfly bandages, but they were stinging like crazy, and my head was pounding. I wished Iz and I were the type of people who stashed whiskey in our shop, because I seriously needed to add some pain relief to my tea. Why don't you tell me the real reason you lie to me all the time?
I never lied to you about Beatrice.
He began, but I held up my hand to stop him. Yeah, I get it. You didn't lie about her. I misread that whole situation. But there is a lot of other shit you have to explain, starting with why you disappear on me all the time. Where do you go?
Gail,
he began, and he put his mug down and sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees.
There's something you need to understand about me. About my past. I haven't had the nerve to tell you because, well, it's a strange story. Most people wouldn't believe it. But I suspect you are the one person in the world who would, because of what you do.
I glanced around the shop, and my heart sank. I'd been through this one before, and I could not do it again. Too many people think that what I do for a living gives them an excuse to treat me like crap. So if they chalk it up to spiritual warfare or past lives or chakras or demons or whatever, I will excuse their behavior. No, Michael, I said, I can't do this right now. My head's killing me. His face fell, and I regretted cutting him off, but all I could think about was sleep. I will tell you this. My job is just a job. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I don't believe in 90% of this. His face was incredulous, and he swallowed hard before he replied.
But you're so good at it.
I shrugged. I didn't say I'm not good at it. I said I don't believe in it. There's a big difference. I was raised by a woman who put coffin nails in my backpack when I had trouble with a bully at school. She's an absolute nutcase, my mom. Half the reason I studied occultism in college was that I wanted to fully understand her. It didn't work, but I like my job. Most of it's bullshit, but I still like it. He continued to stare at me, uncomprehending, and his shoulders sagged as if I had destroyed something inside him. My exhaustion was suddenly so acute that I was afraid I might be sick. Now that you know I won't believe any spiritual garbage, will that change what you want to say? All I want is the cold, hard truth. Do you still want to tell me?
I do. Maybe even more.
He took a few deep breaths.
But now is not the time. I hope it will be soon.
I don't know, Michael. I rubbed my temples. I can't think about this right now. You or Beatrice or the shop or anything. I need to sleep. He stood up and held out his hand.
Let me get you home.
I stood to face him and shook my head. No, I want to be alone for a while.
Do you think someday you could trust me?
It would have been so easy to take his hand and disappear into him, to let him hold me, and let all of my problems and worries disappear like they always did when I was in his arms. I don't know, I said. Do you think you'll ever believe me? He didn't answer me, but instead only shrugged, and on his face was the saddest expression I had ever seen in my life.
You've been listening to Lover's Moon. a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.